Let's start with the language. I love this terminology, fringe constitutionalist. Could you
Yeah,
address why John Brown is your understanding as a fringe constitutionalist?
I use that term as one way. I mean, you could use other terms, radical constitutionalism, but I wanted some term that could capture an aspect of the American political legal tradition that has been overlooked, marginalized, and to some degree discredited intentionally. Um, and and I think Brown's ideas, his substantive ideas, which are rich and have lots of progenitors, um, were discredited for a couple of reasons. One, he ended up eventually taking up arms, not just in these places where others had taken up arms in Kansas, but in his planned assault on Harpers Ferry. And so that is the resort to arms and the point at which, right, someone who's committed to principles is justified to turn to violence has always been a fraught question, and it remains one in our political and legal tradition. So I think that is one reason why his people have tended to overlook him. But the other is that mainstream, after he is intentionally his ideas are intentionally discredited during the course of his prosecution and conviction and his execution. Other mainstream figures who did not resort to violence were able to carry on the fight against slavery. And so the fact that struggle continued and there were other mainstream figures that were a little bit less dangerous to celebrate and extol, right? Frederick Douglass, of course, but others as well. I think is yet another factor for why people have tended to just sort of brush John Brown aside. But when we look at his ideas, when you look at his writings before the Provisional Constitution, when you look at the Provisional Constitution itself, you really see, and I came away with a profound sense that he had a deep respect for the political and legal thinkers that came before him, those that were his contemporaries, including abolitionists, and that I got the sense that he really wanted to struggle to make the ideas of abolition not just persuasive, but compelled. That if you thought as hard as he did and as other abolitionists did, you would see that they were right as a matter of natural law, as a matter of even the original 1787 Constitution. This is where he and Frederick Douglass, or at least the later Frederick Douglass, are closer, right, than Garrison, who believed that the original Constitution was a pact with hell, right, and irredeemable. Brown kind of straddles the two in the sense that he thinks that unlike Douglass, he thinks that he ends up in a place where he thinks the Constitution has to be changed. It has to be replaced. It has to be amended. Something has to change in terms of what it says. But he also hasn't given up on constitutionalism. So this is very kind of fascinating position that he eventually adopts. So I think he's been overlooked. I think this is the value of looking at him is that we get to see a body of ideas that is very much a part of our tradition, and in order to see this aspect of the tradition, I do this in other aspects of my larger book, but I look at some settler constitutions. Some folks broke away from New Hampshire, so contemporaneous with the founding generation. I look at French socialists who were in the mid 19th century in the Midwest who wrote constitutions. I look at John Brown. I look at contemporary white nationalists as a way of updating the body of Confederate ideas that I think were not defeated for all time at the close of the Civil War, but remain in the American culture, and as we've learned more recently, right, can be revived in certain ways. So I think that's the value of paying attention to these figures on the fringes of our tradition.